Welcome back to the Freakshow Files. My name is Clay, and today I am bringing you 10 more controversial movies that people were super offended about. Were they right? Were they overreacting? You will be the judge.
If someone slapped your mother, how would you respond? Would you stay there silent, or would you say something? Of course you would say something. That's why at 1,500 locations around the country, Catholics are standing up, organizing protests like this one to say enough is enough.
Wow.
Blue Velvet is a mystery movie with a very dark twist. It starts off in a quiet, friendly-looking small town where everything seems too perfect. Nice houses, polite people, peace everywhere. But that changes when a young man named Jeffrey finds a severed human ear in a field. Curious and disturbed, he decides to investigate what happens. As he digs deeper, he discovers that his town isn't as innocent as it seems. Beneath the happy surface, there is a disturbing world of secrets, crime, and dangerous people. The movie mixes moments of beauty with moments that are deeply uncomfortable and even scary. It's not your typical mystery. It's strange, intense, and emotional. The movie shows some very unsettling things, including violence and sexual abuse. For many, it felt too graphic, uncomfortable, and shocking to enjoy. And maybe it's because it starts like a slow drama, but then it turns dark and creepy all of a sudden. Plus, one of the characters, played by Dennis Hopper, is one of the most disturbing villains ever put on screen. It doesn't help that David Lynch doesn't always explain things out. For viewers used to clear plots with obvious answers, this movie was frustrating. And some people were upset that the film showed violence and perversion side by side with things that felt sweet or childlike. That mix felt wrong to them. In all fairness, people were uncomfortable with the graphic scenes that aren't easy to watch, especially without warning. And it came out at a time where movies like this were rare. David Lynch made some weird movies. But just like in Happiness, Lynch was trying to show that even in perfect-looking places, there can be darkness hiding underneath. And now Blue Velvet is critically acclaimed for a reason. So at the time the movie was shocking to the majority, now it's considered a work of art. Dogma is a comedy about religion with a weird twist. The story follows two angels who were kicked out of heaven and are trying to find a way to get back in. But if they succeed the plan, they could destroy the entire universe. So a group of unlikely heroes are sent to stop them. The movie is full of jokes about religion, angels, demons, the Bible, and Catholic traditions. But it's not just jokes, there's also action and even some thoughtful questions about faith, belief, and organized religion. It's made by Kevin Smith, this guy, and features a ton of big-name actors like Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Alan Rickman, Chris Rock, and even Alanis Morissette as God. Even before the movie came out in 1999, Dogma made a lot of people angry, and by people I mean religious people. They thought the film was making fun of God, Jesus, and the church. A lot of religious viewers saw it as disrespectful or even blasphemous. It pokes fun at strict religious views and how some people treat religion like a business or a club. The movie had irreverent characters like a black apostle who claimed he was left out of the Bible, and even angels who curse and fight. People really didn't like those ones. Church groups boycotted and protested the movie before it was released. Some theaters refused to show it. Even Kevin Smith showed up at protests as a joke. Of course not. The film isn't trying to insult God or fate. It's poking fun at the way humans mess up religion. Kevin Smith himself is Catholic, and the story shows a lot of love for spiritual ideas, even while it questions certain church traditions. It actually asks real questions like, what does it mean to have faith? Is blind belief actually good? What if religion changes over time? The movie actually celebrates faith in its own way. And buckle up, because it's not the only religious movie people got upset about. Poison is an experimental movie, and it's not one story. It's 3 different stories told at the same time. They are all very different, but they are connected in one big theme: how society treats people who are seen as outsiders. One is about a little boy who does something shocking and then disappears afterwards. Another one is about a scientist who creates a weird potion, drinks it, and turns into something not normal. And the last one is a very raw and emotional story about a man in prison dealing with memories of his childhood and his attraction to another inmate. Each story is strange in its own way, but together they explore ideas like shame, sexuality, violence, and how people get labeled as monsters when they don't fit in. At a time when queer representation in movies was rare or negative, Poison was bold and unapologetic about showing same-sex desire, especially the prison story. Some people, especially conservative groups, were uncomfortable or angry about this. The film received funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, a government organization that supports the arts. That made some politicians and conservative groups really pissed. They say taxpayer money shouldn't be used to make a movie with sex, nudity, or immoral content. Another annoyance was that the movie jumps between 3 totally different styles and stories. For people expecting a normal plot or a clear message, this was confusing. It felt weird, gross, or too artsy for some viewers, especially those not used to experimental films. Some news outlets made the movie sound way more shocking than it really was, especially focusing on the sex scenes. It became a target during a wider debate about freedom of expression versus public decency. This was the early 90s. Of course not. Poison wasn't made to shock for no reason. It was pushing boundaries on purpose. Todd Haynes was using storytelling to explore how people who are different get punished or feared, especially if they are queer or don't follow society's rules. A lot of people reject it because it showed things society was afraid to talk about, especially back then. But over time, people realized it was a powerful and honest piece of art that gave a voice to those who didn't usually get one. Lolita is a dark drama with moments of comedy based on a famous novel by Vladimir Nabokov. The story follows a middle-aged man who becomes obsessed with a much younger teenage girl named Lolita. To stay close to her, he does some very questionable things, including marrying someone just to be near her. Even though the movie doesn't show anything too graphic, especially by today's standards, the main idea is clearly uncomfortable: an adult man falling in love with a teenage girl. Kubrick tells the story in a way that mixes charm, awkward humor, and creepy tension. It's filmed with a clever dialogue, stylized acting, and subtle cues rather than explicit scenes, probably because strict movie rules at the time wouldn't allow anything more direct. I mean, the movie is about a grown man who's romantically obsessed with a teenager. Come on. Even though the film avoids graphic scenes, the implication is still disturbing, and many people felt it was wrong or dangerous to even show a story like this. Religious groups, parents, and critics were shocked that the film was even allowed to be made. At the time, American movies were heavily censored, and Lolita was seen as pushing the limit of what was morally acceptable. Some people were disturbed that the movie included dark comedy. They felt it made light of a serious and creepy subject. The fact that certain parts felt charming or funny made others even more uncomfortable. The novel is way more explicit and disturbing. Kubrick had to tone things down a lot, but many viewers still thought the movie crossed a line. Others, especially fans of the book, thought he watered it down too much and lost some of the novel's meaning. The topic is disturbing. Even though Kubrick handled it carefully, the relationship between the main characters still made people feel uncomfortable. And it's completely reasonable that audiences might find it wrong, inappropriate, or even dangerous. But Kubrick wasn't promoting or celebrating anything bad. He was critiquing obsession, manipulation, and delusion. The movie is about how messed up the main character is, not about romance or love. It opened the door for more complex, uncomfortable conversations, and some film scholars consider it an important piece of work. People were rightly upset because the subject matter is morally disturbing, but Lolita wasn't trying to be sexy or funny in a careless way. It was showing how dangerous and twisted obsession can be. Kids is a rough documentary-style movie that follows a group of New York City teenagers over the course of a single day. These teens are wild, reckless, and unsupervised. They drink, they use drugs, they talk about sex constantly, and roam around the city doing whatever they want. There's not much of a traditional plot, it's more of a raw snapshot of youth culture at its most chaotic moments. The movie focuses on one teenage boy who brags about having sex with young girls, and one teenage girl trying to find him after learning something very serious that could affect them both. The film style is very natural and unfiltered. It feels like you are watching real teens, not actors reading lines. It was filmed with mostly non-professional actors and has a documentary-like feel. Even though some of the actors were over 18 years old, the characters were meant to be around 13 to 17 years old. They are shown engaging in things like unprotected sex, drinking, violence, and drug use. For many, this crossed a line. People thought it was disturbing, even exploitative. Because it looked like a documentary, people worried that the film was taking advantage of the actors or glorifying the behavior. It didn't feel like just a movie. It felt like someone secretly filmed real teenagers in dangerous situations. The story revolves around young teens being sexually active, often in careless and predatory ways. Even though it doesn't show anything graphic, the implications and tone upset a lot of viewers. There's no adult voice, no lesson learned, and no narrator telling the viewer what to think. Some critics felt that made the movie seem irresponsible, like it was just showing bad behavior with no message. The movie also was released without a rating, like R or NC-17, which freaked out theaters, parents, and critics. Some said it should be banned altogether. I think people missed the point on this one. They were so caught up on the fact it looked too real, they forgot about the substance. Kids wasn't trying to be cool or funny. It was a warning sign. It showed how teens were growing up fast without guidance, especially in big cities where adults had checked out. It helped spark a conversation about sex education, HIV/AIDS, peer pressure, and consent. All topics that were often ignored at the time. And the outrage proved that very same point. Straw Dogs is a psychological thriller about a quiet, nerdy American man named David who moves with his wife to her small hometown in the English countryside. David is an outsider. He is not used to the locals who are more rough, aggressive, and suspicious of him. Tensions build between David and the townspeople, especially as they start pushing his limits, teasing him, intimidating him, and slowly making him feel weak and unwanted. The movie explores what happens when someone who avoids conflict is pushed too far. It's about masculinity, power, violence, and how people respond when they feel threatened or humiliated. There is a strong sense of slow burning dread. You know something is going to go very wrong, but you're not sure when or how. The film includes very intense graphic violence, especially towards the end. Some scenes are brutal and shocking, even by today's standards. There's a particular sexual assault scene in the film that caused huge outrage. People were upset not just because of what happens, but how it was filmed. Many felt it was ambiguous, confusing, or even exploitative. Some critics thought it blurred the lines too much and didn't treat the subject with the seriousness it deserved. The movie questions what it means to be a man and whether violence is even justified, but it doesn't give easy answers. Some viewers thought the movie was defending macho behavior, while others thought it was criticizing it. It was hard to tell, and that made people uncomfortable. The way women are treated in the film, especially David's wife, made many viewers feel like the movie was dismissive towards female trauma, or that it didn't care about the consequences of violence towards women. I think the director wasn't making a fun movie. He wanted people to question their own feelings about violence. He was showing how a peaceful man can snap when he feels threatened and asking if that makes him a hero, a monster, or something in between. While the film is definitely hard to watch, that discomfort is part of the point. The backlash was totally understandable, especially because of the intense and the controversial scenes, but it was also a film that wanted to start a conversation about power, manhood, fear, and violence, even if it did so in a deeply uncomfortable way. The Last Temptation of Christ is a movie about Jesus, but not the version most people are used to seeing in church. Instead of showing him as a perfect, all-knowing figure from the start, the movie shows Jesus as someone who struggles with doubt, fear, temptation, and guilt, just like a regular person. He still has a divine purpose, but he wrestles with it. He questions things. He wonders about love, family, and the life he might have had if he weren't the Messiah. The point of the movie is to explore Jesus' humanity, not just his divinity. It asks, what if the hardest part of his mission wasn't dying, but choosing to follow it in the first place? It is based on a novel, not the Bible. And it clearly states at the beginning that it's a fictional, spiritual exploration, not a historical account. Another movie religious groups were not happy about. People were upset that the movie portrayed Jesus as having doubts, fears, and temptations, things they felt didn't belong in a film about the Son of God. They believe it was blasphemous to suggest Jesus could even imagine walking away from his mission. Without spoiling it, there is a scene where Jesus imagined a very normal human life. This includes things like love, marriage, and sex. For many Christians, this was seen as offensive, even though the film made it very clear this is a temptation, not something he actually does. A lot of people protesting the movie hadn't actually seen it. They heard it was anti-Christian or that it disrespected Jesus, and that was enough to cause outrage. Some churches, politicians, and religious leaders called for boycotts or bans. Director Martin Scorsese was a lifelong Catholic, and some people saw this movie as a betrayal. He even got death threats and was labeled a blasphemer. This is embarrassing. The movie isn't mocking religion or Jesus. In fact, it is deeply respectful in tone. It just tells the story in a different, more emotional way. It explores what it truly means for Jesus to be both fully human and fully divine, which is actually a core idea in Christianity. Scorsese made it as a spiritual reflection, not an attack on faith. The backlash made sense for people expecting a traditional version of Jesus, but a lot of the outrage came from misunderstanding the film's intention. It wasn't trying to replace the Bible, it was trying to explore the idea that Jesus' strength came from choosing faith, not just having it automatically. Now, continuing with the Christian bashing theme movies, The Passion of the Christ is a very intense, emotional film that focuses on the final hours of Jesus' life, from his arrest to his crucifixion. It's not a story about Jesus' whole life. It zooms in on his suffering, his treatment by the authorities, and the physical and emotional pain he goes through. The movie shows how he is betrayed, beaten, mocked, and ultimately executed, all while staying faithful to his mission. What makes the movie different from most others is that it's told in ancient languages, Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, with subtitles of course. It also doesn't hold back on graphic violence. Mel Gibson wanted it to feel as realistic and raw as possible, and it shows. The movie is very graphic. It doesn't just show that Jesus suffered, it shows every brutal detail with long scenes of beating, whipping, and blood. Some people felt the violence was too much, like it was more of a horror movie than a spiritual one. A lot of the criticism focused on how the movie shows Jewish leaders and crowds reacting to Jesus. Some viewers and scholars believe the film made it seem like Jewish people as a group were responsible for Jesus' death, which is a harmful and dangerous idea with a long and ugly history. Mel Gibson said that wasn't his intent, but the way certain scenes are filmed and edited made many feel otherwise. Some Christian groups loved it and praised it as powerful and true to the gospel. Others thought it was too focused on suffering and not enough on Jesus' message of love, forgiveness, and resurrection. Some people who aren't religious felt the movie was too intense or pushed a specific agenda. Even before the movie came out, Mel Gibson was seen as a controversial figure, and his later anti-Semitic remarks in real life made the film even more criticized after the fact. I remember they made us watch this movie at our Catholic school, and I never understood why because it was so violent. But many Christians, especially devout ones, felt the film was a powerful act of worship and a serious and respectful portrayal of Jesus' sacrifice. So I am torn here. The movie shows the final hours of Jesus' life in a very painful, graphic, and emotional way. It's not a casual watch, and it's not for everyone. Some saw it as a beautiful act of faith, others thought it was too violent, possibly offensive, or politically dangerous. Whether or not you agree with the backlash really depends on how you approach the film, as a religious experience, a historical drama, or just a movie. Reservoir Dogs is a crime thriller about a group of strangers who come together to pull off a robbery. They all use color code nicknames like Mr. White, Mr. Pink, and Mr. Blonde, so no one knows anyone's real name just in case something goes wrong. Well, something does go wrong. The actual robbery isn't shown on screen. Instead, the movie focuses on what happens before and especially after, as the men try to figure out what went wrong and who among them might have betrayed the group. The movie is filled with sharp, fast-talking dialogue, strong personalities, and rising tension. It's not about the heist, it's about trust, suspicion, and violence between criminals who don't really know each other. It's also Quentin Tarantino's first film, and it introduced the world to his now famous style. Cool characters, long conversations, non-linear storytelling, pop culture reference, and sudden brutal violence. The movie has a few very graphic, shocking scenes, especially ones involving a hostage. Even though most of the heist happened off-screen, the aftermath is bloody, raw, and intense. Some people thought the violence was too realistic or sadistic, not stylized or fun like in some action movies. The movie is filled with foul language, racial slurs, and edgy conversations. For some viewers, this came across as offensive, uncomfortable, or excessive. effective, even if it was meant to show the characters' rough personalities. It didn't follow a regular beginning, middle, end structure. It jumps around in time and leaves out the main event, which is the robbery itself. This confused some viewers or made them feel like nothing happened, especially those expecting a typical action movie. There are long scenes of characters just talking, often about things that seem unrelated, like Madonna songs or tipping at restaurants. If this would have been a 1972 movie, sure. But in the 90s? Reservoir Dogs wasn't trying to be like other movies. It was trying to break the mold. And it did. Tarantino showed that a crime movie could be smart, stylish, and character-driven, not just about shootouts and car chases. Over time, people realized it was one of the most influential indie films ever made. It paved the way for movies like Pulp Fiction and inspired tons of filmmakers. It shocked people with its realistic violence and harsh language, but it also became a classic because it dared to be different. Psycho is a black and white thriller about a woman who makes a risky decision that leads her to stop at a small quiet motel in the middle of nowhere. The motel is run by a polite but very awkward young man named Norman Bates who lives with his mysterious mother in a big house on the hills behind the motel. What starts as a calm, eerie story soon turns into a shocking, suspenseful mystery. Strange things happen, people go missing, and the more the story unfolds, the darker and more disturbing it becomes. The movie isn't packed with action, it's all about tension, secrets, and surprises. It builds slowly, then hits hard with some twists that were totally unexpected for the time. Back in 1960, movies followed a strict guideline about what you could and couldn't show. Psycho broke almost all of them. It showed a woman in her underwear in the first scene, very bold for that era. It had a bathroom scene that was considered taboo, and it featured violence in a way that had never been shown before. Fast, shocking, and realistic. Without spoiling anything, the movie does something bold about halfway through that completely flips the story. Audiences weren't used to this kind of storytelling. Many people left the theater confused or angry because it didn't follow the usual movie structure. Alfred Hitchcock told theaters not to let anybody in once the movie started. This was unheard of at the time. Some people saw this as arrogant or weird, even though it was meant to protect the story's surprises. Early reviews were mixed. Some thought it was disturbing and trashy, while others called it brilliant. Over time, critics changed their minds as they realized how much the film had changed cinema. For people in 1960, Psycho was way ahead of its time. It showed violence, sex, and psychological themes that were rare or totally off limits in movies back then. The pacing and structure threw people off. They didn't know how to process what they had just seen. Remember, movies back then were quite slow and linear. Today, Psycho is considered a masterpiece that helped create the modern horror and thriller genres. It inspired hundreds of films and filmmakers. What confused and scared people in the 1960s is now seen as cinematic genius. The backlash made sense at the time, but today we can appreciate Psycho as the movie that redefined what horror and suspense could be.
Yes, it was Pavarotti who had eaten a cow and farted himself to pieces.
Wow.
What do you think about these films? Have you watched them? I surely recommend you do so. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a dislike, it's okay. And subscribe, it's completely free. Have a fantastic day and I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.